And welcome back to Instant Release. Today, little subject that is a little bit different. It's the 1 year anniversary of my ownership of the Fujifilm X-T2, and I thought I'd do a little, conclusion about what are the good and bad points of that camera after 1 year of use, like my little report of it. So let's start quickly. I'm gonna I don't want this video to be too long. I'm gonna structure this little report in three categories: image quality, autofocus, and ergonomics, because that's the 3 points that are the most important to me. Image quality will include photo and videos, same for autofocus. Let's get started. So, image quality. The X-T2, if you haven't watched the review video I made of that camera, where I compared it to my previous main camera, which was the X-T1, the X-T2 has an APS-C sensor, which is 24 megapixels, which is front-side illuminated, and in 2023, that's a pretty old sensor. That's similar to what you would find in a Sony A6400, for example. It's the same kind of technology. It's not BSI sensor or anything like that. It's not the same sensor technology that we'd find in later Fuji cameras, like the X-Trans 4 equipped cameras, like the X-T3, X-T4, and it's far from being an X-Trans 5 sensor, of course. The thing with the X-T2 though is that we haven't seen that much of a difference or when it came to resolution or dynamic range or noise performance, because if you look at the noise charts and the images from DP reviews or websites like that, it doesn't appear that there is that much of a difference between the old sensor and the new one, and that's pretty good news actually, because that means that we don't really need the newer sensor except if you want the newer features. But as far as image quality goes, the X-T2 is plenty good, and you shouldn't be ashamed of having an X-T2, I found, because you're not going to be lacking dynamic range that much. That's an APS-C camera. You're always going to be lower than a modern full frame, not going to be lower than a old full frame like you can see in the D700 review. But as far as APS-C cameras go, this is still very good, and I am comfortable still using this camera for, I don't know, next 3 to 4 years without a problem. When it comes to video, it changes a bit. When it comes to 1080p video, well, every camera since like the D7000 can do 1080p video. That was like 10 years ago, so it's no shocker than the X-T2 1080p video is alright. Like, I haven't really used it that much except in high-speed recording, like 120 frames a second, things like that. But when it comes to normal recording, it's still better than the X-T1. I'll give it that. There isn't much to say about the 1080p except that it's perfectly usable. You have face detection in 1080p, and that's a pretty good thing to have if you are moving around in your frame. And for the 120 frames per second mode, you have a pretty harsh record limit. I think if you don't have the grip, you have like 5 minutes of record time, and if you have it, you have like 10 minutes or something like that, because otherwise the camera overheats. Or Fujifilm says it overheats, but I was able to capture multiple clips in a row and it didn't. So it's just a little limitation. But as far as the usability of it, I'm not sure that I'd record more than 5 minutes of 120 frames per second footage to slow it down to 25 afterwards anyway. So take that as you want, but I think it's perfectly usable for slow motion. Like, even the autofocus keeps up pretty well. Let's talk about 4K a little bit before. The 4K recording, you have a crop in it, and it's not optimal, but it's really usable. It's a small crop. If you're looking at other cameras from that generation, like the X-T20 or the X-E3, they had the same sensor, same processor, but Fujifilm decided to like completely forego the oversampled cropped 4K and put like a full sensor readout, but with line skipping, and you end up with a much softer 4K in the X-T20 and the X-E3. So at the price of a little crop, like it's 1.17x or something like that, it's a minimal crop in my opinion. It's not 1.5 times crop for sure. At the price of a little crop, you have substantially better video quality when it comes to sharpness in 4K. So I think that's just plain better, as there is no way around it. The X-T2 is a pretty okay 4K camera. It has full autofocus except face detection. Face detection does not work in 4K, but you have all the quick and accurate Fujifilm autofocus otherwise. So that's pretty great. That's pretty good. One thing about the overall dynamic range in video, we have a camera that is shooting in 8-bit only. I haven't tried to do external recording, but even with external through the HDMI, I think it's still 8-bit anyway. But the thing with the X-T2's footage is that if you use the f-log profile, you can recover a lot of dynamic range that you would have lost otherwise using in film simulation, for example. And one problem that the X-T2 has is that it does not have the eternal profile for video shooters, which is a very liked profile that people use generally for casual video, even for more professional video. It's a very gradable profile, and people are liking this profile very much. It's lacking on the X-T2. But if you want to grade Eterna on your software, after you shot the video, you can always shoot in f-log and apply the free LUT, the Eterna LUT that Fujifilm gives you, and you basically have the same result. So, I mean, they didn't put the Eterna profile through a firmware update, which could have been made clearly. But I mean, they give you options to do it afterwards, so I'm fine with that. I've f-log plus Eternal LUT afterwards is what I've been doing this whole time for this YouTube channel on the X-T2, and it's been working fine to me so far for color grading and dynamic range and stuff like that. So I don't have any problem with it. I mean, arguably, I'm not shooting in a very strong environment that would even require f-log in the first place, but that's another story. Let's talk about autofocus now, and there is few things I want to add compared to the last time I talked about the X-T2's autofocus, because the last time I talked about the X-T2's autofocus, I was using the camera very much like my X-T1. Meaning I had a center focus point, and I used AFS or even AFC, but with that only focus point. And since then, I considerably changed the way I go around autofocus. It's not an X-T1 replacement anymore. This is my main camera. So I learned a little bit more. I went a bit deeper into the menus, and yeah. I think I have more knowledge about the X-T2's autofocus, so let's talk about it. First of all, the continuous focus, though much better than the X-T1's continuous focus, is not always perfect. It's not an autofocus monster, but it's definitely enough. Typically, if I'm putting the camera in front of the lens, it's tracking pretty well. It's tracking back my face. There is no problem with it, and it's. For this kind of video, it works very well. For photography, if you are shooting burst mode, sometimes you're probably going to get some back or front focused images, but they are always sharp enough that it doesn't really matter. For subject going from left to right or the other way around, there is not really a situation where it was a problem to the X-T2. All the focus scenarios that I could give the camera went through it like it was nothing. So it's not perfect, but it's still a very good video autofocusing camera for sure. I could shoot sport with it. It has 14 frames a second for electronic shutter, and the autofocus works great in that mode. You could go mechanical shutter, but you'd need the grip. I didn't talk about that in the video, but in the video part. But if you want to shoot video with the X-T2, this is needed, and it's not optional. You need the vertical grip. This is a Mikey like third-party one, which cost me like 40-50 bucks on Amazon, because I didn't want to pay outrageous prices for a native Fuji one. But it works the exact same way, and I don't have a big problem with it. It's a bit cheap, like it's a bit plasticky, and it's not weather sealed in any way. But I'm only using it for video, which I'm not doing outside, so I don't have a problem with that at all. The thing with the grip is that it gives you a headphone jack on the top here, on the end here, and it allows you to have like triple the battery life, and those are pretty good like improvements over the base X-T2, which has for sure a battery life that isn't excellent at all. But the most important thing that the grip gives you is that it gives you a 30 minute record limit in 4K, which without the grip is capped at 10 minutes, I think. I think it's the same for 1080p, but I haven't really shot 1080p video with that camera, so I couldn't tell. But yeah, you go from 10 minutes, which is almost unusable record time, to 30 minutes, which is much better, in my opinion. So yeah, if you want to do video with the X-T2, it's doable, but you have to get the grip. Now for autofocus, there is, in video, as I said, it's very accurate as long as you stay in the focus box. In 4K, you don't have face detection or anything like that, so if you get out of the focus box, and if you get the correct like autofocus presets, it's going to jump to the background, and if you have like shallow depth of field, it will pulse, and it's you could check my other videos. The autofocus was pulsing a little bit in some, and it's distracting. The autofocus settings that I use on the X-T2 are not the default autofocus settings at all. So I'm gonna show it to you. So by the way, the custom settings that you have in your X-T2, you have 5 of them, and the 6th one is a custom one that you can adjust yourself. And the only one I found that worked okay was the first one, this multi-purpose one. This one worked okay for my use, but the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, and 5th just didn't work as well as I thought they would be, even though like the description of them is a little bit like towards the more action, sports, wildlife side. Anyway, for the custom autofocus setting that I have set my tracking sensitivity to 0, my speed tracking sensitivity to 2, and my zone area switching to center. That allows me to do things like talking to you like that, and moving the camera in front of it like that, and it focuses on the camera, and when I remove it, it goes back on my head. And that's like on Sony cameras, they call it like product showcase or whatever, but as long as you know what you're doing, this is good. This is a good thing. Also, there is no flip out screen, you only have a tilt screen. So if you want to see yourself, like I want to see myself when I'm doing this kind of video, you will need a little mirror accessory, which was made for the A6400 initially, but you can put it on the Fujifilm cameras and it works perfectly, because the hot shoe mount is directly just over the screen, so you have your full screen in the mirror, and that's alright. Now, what are the limitations when it comes to image quality, video, autofocus, and etc.? Honestly, there isn't a lot of limitations. I would say that the faster readout in the newer Fuji sensors that allows you to have much faster burst shooting and much less rolling shutter in 4K video, they are nice. Those are nice improvements, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm not really needing those at all. Like I'm not doing very fast action videos or anything like that. And when it comes to shooting, like electronic shutter with 14 frames per second, I don't need generally the no rolling shutter issues because I'm shooting like what, pets, wildlife, some action, some things in events that I don't want to miss. I don't need like a no rolling shutter. I'm not an action shooter, so anyway. And for the video side, yes, the X-T3, X-T4, and all the later Fuji cameras have the ability to display 10-bit video, to output 10-bit video internally and externally. But as far as I am concerned, I'm using DaVinci Resolve, like the free version, not using the studio one. And that version does not support 10-bit footage. So I'm like stuck in 8-bit, which is perfectly fine for me. The upcost of getting an X-Trans 4 sensor camera that outputs 10-bit video would like come in pair with a $300 purchase of DaVinci Resolve Studio, which I don't want to buy at all. So yeah, that's one thing to note in the back of my mind, that until I upgrade my video editing software, I don't have to upgrade my cameras, because anyway, I'm not going to be able to take advantage of it. The rolling shutter issues are a thing, I know, but I mean, is it really an issue? I mean, on the X-T2 I have pretty much the same rolling shutter issues that I would have on a Sony a7 III or something like that. I dare someone to say that the a7 III is a really bad video camera because it has rolling shutter issues. No, not really, actually, no. It's a decent video camera, it's not the best one, but it's decent. Same thing goes for the X-T2. Okay, the other limitation that I found, especially for video and also for photos, because I'm mostly a prime shooter, and as you know, only Fujifilm zooms, except the 200 f2, but this lens is a little bit of a curiosity, I would say. But none of the Fujifilm prime lenses have image stabilization. So if I want image stabilization, I'm forced to use this, which is the 18-135. It's my zoom lens. It's the only zoom lens that I have for Fujifilm, and therefore that's the only lens that has image stabilization. So that's not really the most convenient lens, because the focus distance is pretty long. Like, it's okay for 135mm. I'm rarely shooting videos at that focal length, but for 18mm it's fairly long minimum focus distance, so it's not the best. And for photography, all my longer prime lenses, like the Viltrox 85mm or the 56mm, those lenses are pretty long, and not having image stabilization in occasions I would want to shoot at f4 or f5.6 to get a bit more depth of field. I'm sometimes forced to go back to f2 or f1.8 or f1.4 to be able to have a sharp picture, because otherwise it would be all blurry, or I would have to crank the ISO above a certain limit I would be comfortable shooting in. Typically with the X-T2 that would be 6400. I try not to go over 6400 ISO, and if I need to go to 12,800 in an event, that generally means that I'm gonna have to pull out some heavy noise reduction in post to have the image look good. And for client work, that's really not the thing I want to do. So yeah, the lack of image stabilization in the camera, like the lack of IBIS, is a real limitation. Now let's talk about the last part of it, and that's ergonomics. And ergonomics are what they are. On the X-T2, they are not terrible, but they are not excellent either. You see, there is one thing about the X-T2 that I love, about ergonomically, and that's the fact that it's small. It's a small camera. It fits in the palm of my hand, literally. And the reason it does that is because it has a small grip. It fits everywhere. But the problem with that small grip is that if I want to put a long lens like this on it, it's really unwieldy, and it becomes like you have a you need to hold the camera like harder than you would on another camera. Let's take an example. And let's take an example of a camera that has a good grip and a good design grip. The D700. I talked about that camera and I talked about the ergonomics of that camera, but it really boils down to it boils down to how the grip is designed. And a good design grip should have, in my opinion, it should have somewhere a way to catch your fingers in two, axes. You have, I'm gonna call it the X-axis and the Y-axis. You need to have your grip that's able to catch your fingers in both of them. So for the D700, for example, it has right there, if the camera wants to pick up, it has a little, groove here. And this catch your fingers in the X-axis. And it has another one here, like it curves that way. This catches your fingers in the Y-axis. That means that if I want to put a lens on it, not only if I have my hand like that, it will like rest on my finger in this, way of rotation, but it will also have it in this way of rotation, And the X-T2 has one of those, grooves to catch your fingers. One of them is missing. It has the groove in the Y-axis. So for everything that goes in that way, it will catch your fingers here, right? But for everything that, and you have the camera that is front heavy with a heavy lens, it will not catch your finger. Your finger will slip like that. So you need to grip the camera tighter. And there is some accessories that you can put on the X-T2, like this hand grip, that allows you to have like a girthier part to grip, but you still don't have the thing to catch your finger right there. It still does not work. So that's my biggest problem with the X-T2's ergonomics, and that's the fact that if I want to have a big lens on it, I'm gonna have trouble holding it. And by the way, the vertical grip that you can add on the camera, like it adds a little, like it's a thick boy pretty much for the vertical part of it of the thing. It has like a hint of focus. Okay, it has a hint of a groove here. It works kinda, but also not really. And for the regular orientation, it has that little plastic thing that does not do anything. So it's not the most comfortable camera to use, for sure. All of that comes to what is the purpose of the X-T2 now, because I put a heavy emphasis on the ergonomics of my cameras, otherwise I would not be shooting a Nikon D2H. But and you've probably also have catched the fact that the X-T2, despite being my main camera supposedly, is in my hand. So what's filming me? Well, I feel a little bit dumb. I'm gonna be honest with you. I feel a little bit dumb because I just posted a video about gear acquisition syndrome, and the following day I posted the video, I'm recording something where I say I bought another camera. But anyway, I'm gonna talk about that camera, which is the Fujifilm X-H1, and right now I'm gonna switch to it. And welcome back. So now we're now back on the X-T2 for video, and I have matched all the settings, I think. Nope, not the shutter speed. 180 degrees shutter angle, please. Thank you. Okay, so I replaced the X-T2. The X-T2 is not my main camera anymore. It replaced the X-T1 as my backup camera. And what has replaced the X-T2 as my main camera is now the X-H1. Why that decision? Why the X-H1? Why not an X-T3? So first of all, before talking about that, I wasn't going to buy an X-H1 in the first place because that camera was, in my opinion, still overpriced for what it was. It's a good camera, but considering the fact that it's basically an X-T2 with a few tweaks and a little bit larger, I thought that the X-T2 was considerably better value, and most importantly, it's not worth it spending like $300-400 more for an X-H1. But that being said, I got an extremely good deal for that X-H1 with the vertical grip, which is this time not a third-party one. That's the original Fujifilm version, so it's weather sealed as well. And I gotta say that this camera has surpassed all of my expectations for now. The last clip that you've seen, the last part of what's before this part of the video, has been made with the X-H1 in F-Log. I'm gonna put the usual like eternal LUT behind in post-production afterwards, but just know that there is some improvement that the X-H1 has. For example, face detection in 4K, which is not present in the X-T2, and the eternal film simulation, which I'm probably going to shoot on my videos with on the X-H1 going forward. It also came with a few batteries, which are NPW126S batteries, which I didn't have before, so a bit better battery life there. And it fixes every problem that I had with my previous kit. So my previous kit for shooting pretty much everything was X-T2 as my main camera for photos and videos, and for photo backup I had the X-T1. And generally the X-T1 stays in the bag, like I don't have to get the X-T1 out, but there has been a few instances where I was shooting with both camera at the same time, like with two straps, because I didn't have the time to switch out lenses. And in those instances, I really felt the downgrade in sensor and autofocus performance, to a point that I'd rather shoot with the X-T2 with much more accurate autofocus and get the shot sharp, rather than shooting with the X-T1 with the correct focal length. But the shot was not in focus, and I had considerably worse ISO performance and less resolution, etc. and etc. and etc. But that wasn't really the biggest problem. The biggest problem I had with the X-T1 as my backup of an X-T2 is not a problem of the X-T1 itself. It's a problem of using it in combination with another camera. The X-T1 has a very special color science, I would say, and color matching the X-T2 files with the X-T1's files, or the other way around, was really a pain to do, and I didn't want to do it anymore. So that's why I grabbed the X-H1, which not only fixes all the gripes I have with the X-T2, meaning it has image stabilization, it has a good grip, as you can see. I explained the thing that catches your finger in 2 axes. It has that. It also has few other upgrades. It has image stabilization, but most importantly, it's the exact same autofocus performance, and it's the exact same color science, because it's the same sensor and processor than the X-T2, and that is a huge deal for me. That really is a huge deal. So I really want to put some emphasis on the fact that the X-H1 is not something I did not caving into gear acquisition syndrome. That's a camera that will considerably help me make my life easier. Really, I'm serious with this. A thing I didn't talk about in the last video is the fact that gear acquisition syndrome is a thing. But when you need it's also important to know when you need something. Not that you only want something, but you need something. And this ability to completely forego the color correction process, or to be able to do handheld video, those were things I needed and I didn't have with the X-T2. And being able to rely on both of my cameras without thinking too much about which one will work and which one won't, that was also something that I missed. And yeah, just all the other little bonuses that the X-H1 has over the X-T2. But there is also another point for me to buy the X-H1, and that was the fact that when I had X-T1 and X-T2, the two cameras for the form factor, were extremely similar. The X-T2 was a few millimeters bigger here and there, but basically those cameras were identical. Viewfinder was the same, the grip was basically the same, the dials were the same, everything was the same. So that means that I always use the X-T2, and like going forward after the moment I got the X-T2, the X-T1, outside of moments where I had to use both cameras at the same time, the X-T1 saw very little use, and I really hate having one camera or one piece of gear or whatever that does nothing and just sits on the shelf. That's the worst part of gear acquisition to me, is buying something that you don't need. I hate it. So now that I have the X-T2 and the X-H1, I mean, those cameras are different enough physically that there is instances, like for example street shooting, where I would say, oh yeah, the X-T2 is going to make a lot more sense than the X-H1, and other situations where I'm hiking and going into the mountains where I want the ergonomics of the X-H1, I want the IBIS on the X-H1. And all of those things makes me think that I'm not going to completely forget the X-T2 exists. I'm going to use the X-T2 in the situations that requires the X-T2, and I'm going to use the X-H1 in the situations that require the X-H1. And I think that's a good thing. That's a good thing to have. Now, what will happen about the X-T1? Well, I know I would say, I said it, I think, in the DS100 review, that I would not sell that camera. But sadly, I think it's time for me to find another owner to the X-T1, and it's already packed in its box. I still have the box, and yeah, I think I'm gonna sell it. It has some issues. That's not a perfect camera, but I think that if there is someone that's starting out in photography, and I can provide him or her with a good camera to start on, with the good features that beginners actually need, I'm gonna be proud of myself, and I'm gonna be happy. I would have helped someone, so who wouldn't be proud of it? Okay, that being said, it's conclusion time. So, is the X-T2 a good investment in 2023 or 2022 or whatever? Yes, I think it is. I think it's one of the best value like, if you take all the cameras on the market right now, I think there's only two cameras that are getting close to the value proposition of the X-T2, and those two cameras are the X-T2 and the Olympus EM1 Mark II. And two different cameras, albeit, but I think those two cameras have a really good and an interesting value proposition, and no other cameras that I'm aware of are really coming close when it comes to cost efficiency. You can find those cameras today for $500 or less. That's insane for flagship cameras from 2016. And the X-T2 is perfectly good when it comes to image quality to last even a few more years, I think. The autofocus, if you know how to handle it, it's not something that will do the work for you. It's not an A7 IV, but it will do the work it will do the work if you know how to use it. And same thing as the image quality, it's still good for a few more years. Ergonomics are another point. This is the proof that those aren't perfect, of course, but if you can go over them, if you use the X-T2 mostly for street shooting with small lenses, you won't have any problem with the X-T2. And if you do still have problems with the X-T2, you can always buy something like this. And even the use of long focal length like this Viltrox 85 will still be possible in the right conditions. So, in conclusion, I don't have anything, like, the X-T2 does not limit me in any way when it comes to photography, with few exceptions like long focal length, dark conditions, and I want depth of field. That's the only thing where it would limit me, and handheld video, but those two things are really, really rare for me. If you are going through those things, I would advise you maybe to look as I said, in the Olympus EM1 Mark II, which is a wonderful camera for that, or the X-H1, which is a bit more expensive. I got the X-H1 for basically the price of an X-T2, so that's why I got it in the first place. But if you don't have, super big requirements when it comes to photography and videography, X-T2 is going to be plenty for 99% of users that are casual users, Like, it's not going to be a huge problem for, I mean, I know some, I've talked online to some professional photographers that still shoot weddings with a couple of X-T2s. I mean, that's the proof of something, I think, about that camera. Anyway, if you like that video, if you want to see me do more of those, drop a like, drop a comment, and I read all the comments because I don't have much of them in the first place. But anyway, for more Fujifilm and Nikon content, because those are the two camera systems I use, yeah, drop a subscribe or whatever. I don't have any photo gallery today to show you because I had the X-H1 for like a week. So it's not a review of the X-H1, by the way. It's really focused on the X-T2. I'm going to do a review of the X-H1, of course, but it's going to be very similar to the X-T2 with the things I've mentioned, so I don't have a lot of things to say for yet. If I find other things in the meantime, I'm of course going to talk about it, but for now it's really classic stuff. So as I said, I don't have any photo gallery for you today. I could have put like some X-T2 photos, but you already have plenty of them in the other video, and I haven't really been able to shot the X-T2 a lot because I've shot the D700, the D2H a lot, and I tried to shoot the X100s also to get sample pictures for the review, which will not come. Sorry, but yeah. On that note, thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. See ya.